Gunpowder was another important invention. It's said that Chinese scientists invented it by accident when they were trying to discover a medicine that would make them immortal. How the Silk Road helped spread Islam. Many religions were spread as people shared ideas when they traveled along the Silk Roads. Buddhism is one religion that traveled east from India. Christianity and Hinduism also traveled. Islam spread on the Silk Roads as well. Islam began in the 600s CE. Very quickly, the religion spread along the Silk Roads and reached faraway islands during the same century. There were many reasons why Islam spread so quickly. Islam probably spread so quickly because Muslims were very talented merchants and businessmen. They traveled on the Silk Roads overland to trade goods. In addition, the peoples on the Arabian Peninsula were excellent at sailing. This helped them travel along the maritime portions of the Silk Road. As great sailors and merchants, Muslims often went to China to get goods and bring them back. Then traders from Europe would come to the Middle East to trade for those goods. However, along the way, they had to stop for supplies at important Asian port cities. Eventually, some Muslims ended up moving to the various Asian cities, especially the islands of Indonesia. There were lots of unique spices that people in the West wanted. In addition, as merchants visited the same cities over and over again, they slowly shared Islam with the people with whom they interacted. Eventually, one of the Sumatran kings converted to Islam. That influenced the people there to also convert. Over time, Islam became a part of the culture of many countries in Asia. It was all thanks to the Muslim merchants who talked and shared with many different peoples during their travels. In addition to bringing their religion, Muslims also brought a lot of other knowledge with them. For example, they brought their medical knowledge. That way, some Chinese learned more about healing wounds and other details about medicine. When traveling to India, Muslims brought their knowledge about astronomy. One of these ideas was that the Earth probably wasn't the center of the solar system or universe. The Silk Road gave people an opportunity to meet and share ideas. The Silk Road also paved the way for many to learn about Islam. The history of the Silk Road. Can you imagine living in a world with no airplanes or ships to move products around the world? Today, ships and airplanes carry food, toys, dishes, and more all around the world. That way, we can enjoy products and foods that are made and grown in other places. But that hasn't always been the case. Long ago, one of the most important first trade routes was the Silk Road. It stretched from Europe through the Middle East and all the way to China. On this route, people traded all kinds of goods. Some goods even moved all the way from China to Europe, or the other way around. About 300 years before the Silk Road, there was the Royal Road. This road connected the Middle East to Europe. On this road, Persians even reached India and parts of Africa. Later, parts of these trade routes became part of the Silk Road. The Silk Road officially began in the 100s and 200s BC. During that time, the Han Dynasty ruled in China. They explored and searched for lands west of them. Eventually, trade began to take place between Greece and China. Then, the Roman Empire and empires in present-day India also got involved. Lots of different roads grew into the Silk Roads. It's interesting to note that the Silk Roads didn't get their name until long after people stopped trading along those routes. A German geographer is the first person to call the trade routes the Silk Roads. He first used the term in the 1800s, 400 years after the Silk Roads were no longer used. However, the name was a good fit. Not only was a lot of silk traded, but the Greek name for China was Ceres, which means the land of silk. In total, the Silk Roads covered 4,000 miles. For hundreds of years, the Silk Roads were very important. Both on land and by sea, everything from products to cultures, science, and even religion moved along these routes. Explorers like Ibn Battuta also used the Silk Roads for travel. Through his travels, people in Europe learned a lot more about life in Asia, and specifically in Mongolia. By the 1400s, the Ottoman Empire was in charge of much of Europe and Western Asia. In 1453 CE, the Silk Roads stopped being used. This was because the Ottoman Empire put a boycott on trade with China, so merchants could no longer trade goods with the Far East. The history of the Silk Roads is fascinating, from tales of merchants to the history of goods like silk, spices, paper, and gunpowder, to the transfer of knowledge. The Silk Roads changed history. Travel on the Silk Road. Today, if you wanted to travel from Xi'an, China to Venice, Italy, you'd probably take a flight. However, if you lived about 1,000 years ago, you'd have to make a much slower trip. Back then, you probably would have traveled along the Silk Road. Travel on the Silk Road, which included different roads used for trade from about 130 BC to 1400 AD, was dangerous and difficult. Many areas went through the desert and other wild, unpopular areas. The seas were also important parts of the travel routes. While traveling overland, most merchants used camels to carry their goods. Native to Central Asia, these tough animals can carry up to 500 pounds. Camels can also live in hot desert conditions and with little water. Other merchants used horses for travel. Usually, merchants traveled in groups called caravans. Together, it was safer to travel than if they each went on their own. Along the Silk Road, special hotels or inns were built. They were places for the caravans to rest. Called caravanserais, some of them were between cities, while others were closer to cities. In many areas of the Silk Road, there were caravanserais every 20 miles or so. These places gave merchants a safe place to sleep, food, and a place to interact with other merchants. Sometimes they even traded goods at these spots. The seas were also an important area of the Silk Road. Some of them were the Red Sea, the Arabian Sea, the Caspian Sea, the Black Sea, and the Mediterranean Sea. Around these seas, many cities grew to become important ports. They were important trading cities and also provided ships with supplies, including fresh water. On the seas, ships faced pirates because of the valuable goods they carried. You may think that only rich merchants traveled along the Silk Road. Historians have found evidence that all kinds of people, from poor to very wealthy, traveled on this route. Most people who traveled along the Silk Road only made part of the journey. They usually just had a goal to make it to certain major cities where they traded with others. Then their products may have traveled farther with another merchant. The harsh temperatures, weather, and unpopulated areas made the Silk Road a dangerous place to travel. However, the caravanserais and major cities along the route, along with tough pack animals like camels, made it possible for trade to happen between China and Europe. Products and trade on the Silk Road. Can you imagine how the Silk Road got its name? If you guess that it has something to do with silk cloth, you're right. This beautiful, silky material was very popular hundreds of years ago, as it continues to be today. However, it used to be a cloth shrouded in secret. Silk was first invented in China. When the silkworm makes its cocoon, it creates a delicate fiber. With that fiber, silk is woven. Back when it was invented in about 2700 BC, how it was made was kept a secret. In fact, emperors made laws that anyone who told the secret of silk to foreigners would be put to death. However, silk was a very special material. The Chinese traded silk and gave it as gifts to foreign leaders. Soon, silk was very popular in the Byzantine Empire. Samples of Chinese silk from the time of the Han Dynasty, 200 BC to 200 AD, have been found in Egypt and other faraway places. However, despite trying to keep silk a secret, eventually people in India, Japan, and Persia learned how to make this special cloth. However, the Silk Road had already been established, creating important trade routes where silk and other products were traded. What did the Chinese trade their silk for? Some of the most popular exchanges were gold, silver, and wool. The Chinese invented and created all kinds of popular products. Aside from silk, they also invented paper-making methods. This knowledge and the paper may have also been traded along the Silk Road. Gunpowder was another important invention. It's said that Chinese scientists invented it by accident when they were trying to discover a medicine that would make them immortal. However, soon they realized that it could be used for military purposes. It was also traded along the Silk Road. Spices were also traded along the Silk Road. Some of these spices came from as far as Indonesia. A few examples of spices are cinnamon, pepper, ginger, nutmeg, cloves, and saffron. In addition to goods, ideas, languages, religions, and cultures were exchanged along the Silk Road. Plus, merchants bought and used local goods such as vegetables and clothes when they stopped in cities along the routes. The Silk Road provided a rich trade route where many ideas and products were traded. From new inventions to foods and silk, many important products were spread across continents. The Silk Road today. What would you find if you visited the Silk Road today? It crosses many countries and cultures. However, you don't need to travel by camel or ship to visit many areas of the Silk Road today. Today, you can use more modern transportation. Today, the Silk Road is considered a UNESCO World Heritage Site. That means that parts of the road are protected. Plus, UNESCO has also created a whole program that features information and research about the Silk Road. That way, anyone can learn about this important part of world history. People still visit the Silk Road today. However, today, many people do it as a form of tourism and not to trade any goods. The scenery along the Silk Road is very beautiful. Some of the beautiful scenery along the route includes the Tupoftan Peak. This amazing mountain is located in Pakistan, on the border between Afghanistan and China. In the times of the Silk Road, people would have had to walk through this valley. In that same area, a part of the Silk Road lives on. There is a highway there that connects that area of Pakistan to the Uyghur Autonomous Region of Xinjiang, China. Many people would like to see parts of the Silk Road revived. For example, the United Nations has a plan to create a Trans-Asian Highway. Yet another group has proposed a train route. Research to learn about the Silk Road also continues today. Archaeologists are working to find more sites and learn more about what happened in the past. When researchers dig up sites where people lived along the Silk Road, they learn more about how cultures interacted. For example, archaeologists find coins and dishes from other places. Other important information that people are still discovering and learning about are ancient texts. Ancient scrolls, books, and tablets tell about what life was like on the Silk Road hundreds of years ago. Today, we have our own mini versions of the Silk Road as we travel around the world. What do you think people in the future will say about our travels?